Why should Christians care? I think you already answered that in large part because of the size and the influence of the Anglican Communion, its impact on Western and global history, and its continued influence throughout the majority world today. That's why we should care what's happening in the Anglican Communion.
It's totally disproportional, right? It's to the Western civilization, through it's either providence or it's the accident of history. The Anglican ethos has been the most influential Protestant, non-Catholic influence in all of the world. Because the British Empire was the most powerful thing on earth from post-Elizabethan times until World War I, right? And so this massive evangelism, more Christians became Christians in the non-Caucasian Western world through Anglican effort than any of the other Protestant works, because the empire was brought to all these places. And so the Archbishop of Canterbury has historically for 200 years been the second most recognizable prelate on earth to the Pope himself, right? So there's this disproportional influence that has always been there. And now it's waned almost congruently with the demise of the British Empire and British influence and the might of the United Kingdom itself, right? And so it's kind of coincides when we talked about Elizabeth, how she lived through this great transition, the loss of the empire, then the rise of the Commonwealth. And, by the 70s, before Margaret Thatcher came to office, England was just about becoming a third world country themselves economically, right? They were a mess. So all these things have happened in history in these last 60 to 70 years and so forth. So
that's everything that's going on in the background to this statement that gets put out. And I think there's really two things that we want to touch upon as we think about the GAFCON statement. The first is that it's bold, it's biblical, it's very admirable in a sense that they're taking a stand on biblical and historic Christian sexual morality. But I think the other part that hasn't gotten as much attention is that it's incomplete.
It's problematic. Yeah, it is. I mean, obviously, I've been saying this for a long time in my own ministry and writings and different things, that the Anglican Communion it's a farce. It's a shadow. It's a mirage. It hasn't really existed for a long time. There's the instruments of communion, right? There's the Archbishop of Canterbury himself. There's the Lambeth Conference. There's the primates meeting. So primate being the head bishop of each of the provinces, which I think is now like 40. There used to be 40 independent provinces. And then there was a thing called the Anglican Consultative Council, which was just this crappy administrative bureaucracy piece. But they haven't been, the primates has in time became the most powerful instrument in the Anglican Communion, but they were so divided on just major central tenets of the Christian faith, including just whether the creed was true, and besides all the sexuality issues, that constantly lots of primates would just boycott the meeting. And in the last Lambeth Conference, most of the Africans didn't even go. Right. So it wasn't really truly the
false unity.
The worldwide episcopate there. Yeah. And so they passed a bunch of junk that never would have been passed if the actual 2/3 world was there. So it hasn't really existed since 98. The fact that the Western remnants of the British empires, America, Canada, the fact they all rejected Resolution 1.110 began the absolute collapse of the communion. And then Rowan Williams just made a mess of it. He was, as Archbishop, he didn't do anything to pull the communion together, because he really was sympathetic to the progressive cause, right? And when you're first among equals, you can't do that. It's like the Pope can't ever be about his agenda. He has to be about only defending what's always been true.
Exactly.
Right? And so we've had two really poor archbishops of Canterbury, in my opinion, in a row. And I don't think, and I think it's done. I don't think the Church of England will survive in any significant form from this point forward. Nobody goes to church in England. There's nobody being born. There's no baptisms. There's no central doctrine. There'll be a few healthy parishes. A few cathedrals will last for a while, but its future is really morbid. What's coming down the pipe for it. So, and it's really hard. A person who's, I've dedicated my life in Anglican ministry. It's to watch it disintegrate, but to disintegrate over things that clearly are unbiblical and simply against natural law.
Things that should be obvious and uniting to
for a believer,
for believers.
Right? Like we've talked about, you can't read the first chapter of Romans and come to the conclusions you are about marriage, human sexuality, what's the created orders for, and other than saying St. Paul's wrong.
Yeah.